Isaiah 64 through 66. Well, using again that picture of Israel going into exile, the sins that led them into a situation where they're going to find themselves in captivity. Let's remember again that the sins that caused them to go into captivity are not just behavioral, really, but it's deeper than that. And this is the last verse of Isaiah 63. We, speaking of the people in captivity, have become like those of old over whom you never ruled, those who were never called by your name. That brings back that idea again of Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9, where God leads Israel, but he's given the authority of the other nations to created gods. And so Isaiah's leaning into the idea that we have become just like Gentiles in how we're being thought of and how we're acting. Well, the exile leads to two emotions, and this begins 64, verses 1 and 2. Oh, that you would rend the heavens, that you would come down, that the mountains might shake at your presence, as fire burns brushwood, as fire causes water to boil, to make your name known to your adversaries, that the nations may tremble at your presence. It's good to remember that the feelings that are coming out of the hope for the end of exile include both vengeance, vindication on the cause of the Israelite, who are those who are loyal to Yahweh, but also destruction and vengeance. And that's important to remember, because when we come into the life of Jesus, again, well into the future, he's going to say to Nicodemus, I did not come to destroy. And it's going to be the common idea that the Messiah, when he shows up, will carry out that vindictive vengeance side of God's plan. And Jesus will make the opening line there in John 3:17, that his role as Messiah, as he's fulfilling it, does not include that vengeance side, at least in the way that the Jew had thought. Well, who is then composing, as it were, once this is settled and once Israel comes to the promised ending of their exile, who composes the people that are on, as we've called, the leftovers or the remnant? Well, this is where Isaiah 66 or 65, starting in verse 1, is interesting. I was sought by those who did not ask for me. I was found by those who did not seek me. I said, here I am, to a nation that was not called by my name. 65, I'll be reading 1 through 4. I have stretched out my hands all day long to a rebellious people who, notice the description of these people, who walk in a way that is not good, according to their own thoughts, a people who provoke me to anger continually to my face, who sacrifice in gardens and burn incense on altars of brick, who sit among the graves. Well, that's different. That sounds more like, well, let's read the next lines. Who spend the night in the tombs, who eat swine's flesh. In other words, Isaiah 65, 1-4 is predicting that the group that will be saved, especially in the final analysis, this seems to be looking well into the future, it includes at least those who are Gentiles, those who sit among tombs. Jews never do that, of course, those who even eat swine's flesh. And the broth of abominable things is in their vessels. So the point being that predicted in the later parts of Isaiah is that the Gentiles will be included among those who are finally saved by Yahweh. One more text is 65 verse 9. And here I'm going to lean on that little word in Hebrew, min. It means from. And let's read Isaiah 65 verse 9. Again, describing the group that's going to come out of exile and be saved by Yahweh. I will bring forth descendants from Jacob. This is the only time that little min occurs in front of the word Jacob in the Hebrew Bible. From Jacob. And repeated, from Judah. Again, the only time in the Hebrew Bible that we have that little word min Yehuda or min Yaakov is here in 65:9, and it gives the idea that this group coming out, being saved by Yahweh, is not Jacob. It's not Judah in how it's been used as just the ancestors of Abraham. It is a group within or from Jacob. And then he ends this way, by an heir of my mountains, my elect shall inherit it. Now let's talk about this word that causes so much argumentation again and disruption in the Christian tradition. They are called the elect who shall inherit it, and my servants shall dwell there. This word in Hebrew, bakir, is used 13 times. It's not uncommon, in other words. And here is where I would sense that we are seeing a migration of meaning for an otherwise normal, non-religious word. Back in the Psalms, we've heard the use of the word elect in like 105:43. He brought out his people with joy, his chosen ones, his elect with gladness. And he's recounting the story of the Exodus, where David, or the psalmist, is recounting or thinking of the Exodus and who God saved. Well, he saved the Jew, he saved Israel, or Abraham's descendants, and he calls them elect. But we know from the story as it moves through the Old Testament that not all Israelites were loyal to Yahweh. But notice how in Isaiah, next to the Psalms, is the most common, or is the author that uses bakir, or elect, the most common. Listen to 3 passages in Isaiah. Isaiah 43:20. The beasts of the field will honor me. Speaking of this group here and coming out of exile. The jackals and the ostriches, because I give waters in the wilderness and rivers in the desert, to give drink to my people, my bakir, my elect. 45:4. For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel my elect, I have called you by name, and I have named you, though you have not known me. 65:9, we just used it here, but remember how it ends. My elect shall inherit the earth, and my servant shall dwell there. And then 65:22, for as the days of a tree, so shall the days of my people and my elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands. In other words, the word election, or concept of election, is an idea that migrates to the Old Testament. It begins with just choosing Israel as a nation. But then by the time you get to the end of Isaiah, the word is used for that group that is brought out of captivity, specifically the loyalists, because they will be the ones who will experience the new heavens and new earth. And by the way, as we finish Isaiah, let's talk about that signpost that will be welcoming people into the new heavens and new earth. It's an interesting verse in 66, verse 22. For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I shall make, remain before me, says the Lord. So this is the sign that people will see when they come into the new heavens and earth, which seems to be, again, a picture of God recreating the world in some real way after this time of vindication and destruction, and it will be for those who are loyal. So shall your descendants and your name remain, and it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me. Compared to the tribalism that really runs through the Old Testament, that is shocking language. That in front of, shall we say, walking into the new heavens and new earth, the idea that Gentiles, and Gentiles acting as Gentiles, not proselytes, but Gentiles who remain Gentile, taken from, as it were, people, or from people groups, including Israel, that group that goes into the new heavens and new earth will include everyone. That would be what I would call the universalism of the Old Testament. Not that everyone goes into the new heavens and new earth, but the representatives of those who end up there are indeed representing all flesh of the earth.